fashionable entrance. That's nice.
Try.
Yeah, what all
Dirt
this
on
stuff?
my
I don't know
floor.
what all this stuff is, man. They don't treat our desk with
I
respect.
know.
So I already have the meeting on here. How the heck do I pull it up since it hasn't been on my screen? Nothing's supposed to be
Was it in your emails?
I'm pulling all over.
Yeah, she's got it. She can't figure out where to go get it. There you go. What you got? Good news?
Lorraine was talking at an event I was at today. She mentioned a retreat for city mayors to talk about vision for DeKalb future.
Retreat?
For her and city mayors, I don't know if you heard. I may have misheard her,
Yeah, it's not a retreat.
but it is. You're aware of some kind of thing where
Yeah,
city
we have
mayors and her.
we have a policy meeting coming up. We do it every month, and they have different speakers, and she's speaking at our.
Okay.
The one you went to for me that time.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
Tucker.
I thought it was something big.
No. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go ahead and get started. I will call to order the City Council public hearing work session for March the 13th. The clerk will call the roll.
Mayor Brian Mock.
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem Jimmy First.
Present.
Councilmember John Mesa.
Here.
Councilmember Leslie Robson. Councilmember Paul Stovall.
Here.
Councilmember Emerald Vythe.
Present.
Thank you. If someone be so kind as to approve the agenda for me.
Motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda as submitted. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, we have an agenda. Announcements and presentations this evening? Nothing? Good deal. We'll move on down to the public hearings. I will read the rules of order for public hearings, zoning matters. The hearing shall be presided over by the mayor. After calling the hearing to order, the mayor shall request the parcels of property which are the subject of the zoning proposal be identified and read. Following such identification and reading, the development director's recommendation shall be presented. The mayor and city council shall cause the director's written recommendation to be made part of the record. Proponents of each proposed zoning decision shall then be allowed a total of 10 minutes for presentation of data, evidence, and opinion concerning the zoning decision. If all 10 minutes are not used, the proponent's remaining time may be reserved for rebuttal. Opponents of each proposed zoning decision shall then be allowed a total of 10 minutes for presentation of data, evidence, and opinion concerning each zoning decision. The presentation times may not be reduced, but may be extended by majority vote, provided they are expanded equally for proponents and opponents. Anyone wishing to speak shall come to the microphone, give your name and address to the city clerk, and please do not speak unless you have the microphone and have been recognized. With that, we will move into the first item on the agenda, which is PZ 2025-1401. It's 3715 Longview Drive.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is John Maximock. I'm Director of Planning and Development. I'm happy to present these three cases to you tonight. The first is 3715 Longview Drive. It's renovations for a place of worship. This is the Brookhaven Kollel Synagogue, care of Dillard Sellers, and Julie Sellers is here. This is 0.9 acres. The zoning is corridor commercial. Under consideration here tonight are 2 variances and 1 waiver. And this is a renovation of a 2-story commercial building that exists on site today. You can see the location. If you're coming out of Chamblee Plaza and you turn left, you'll see the magnolias on the street, and then this street slopes down towards Admiral, and on the right is the subject property. And you can see the wooded corner just before Admiral. Again, in detail on what's being considered here tonight for council consideration or for a decision on Tuesday is to reduce the required number of off-street parking spaces from 60 to 10 spaces. There's also to increase the maximum number of shared parking spaces from 25% or 15 spaces to 58% or 35 spaces. And that was the applicant's exact request. That's been modified slightly since the application. The applicant also requests one waiver, and that is to allow 2 existing curb cuts to remain on a single street frontage where only one is required. And this is a listing of what I just described. And here is a existing site plan showing the building in tan at the lower center, the stream buffer running prominently above it to the north, and the street running to the left. And you can see the 2 curb cuts. I noticed earlier in my trial that the clicker, the laser doesn't work on the screen, but tried to describe it here with this. Here is the proposed site plan. And here are locations of shared parking as originally proposed in the true sense of shared parking. Here's the floor plan of how the applicant owner would like to use the building. And here's a look at the existing elevation of the building, the proposed elevation of the building, photos of the subject property from different angles, and a view of that zoning buffer in the corner. You could the zoning, it's very prominent as it drops down pretty severely into that stream. Here are a couple of photos of the properties across the street. Still more pictures of the adjacent areas. So the staff recommendation is approval with conditions of the following variance requests, and that is a variance from section 250-2A to reduce the required number of off-street parking spaces from 60 required to 10 with conditions, and then approval with conditions to allow 2 existing curb cuts to remain on a single street frontage. Staff is making no recommendation for the shared parking request that was originally made. And in detail, the request for a variance to increase the maximum number of shared parking spaces under the ordinance from 25% or 15 spaces to 58% or 35 spaces from that section of the ordinance in order to supplement the minimum parking is not necessary, because that subsection limits its administrative approval of a shared parking agreement. And because of the applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the number of shared spaces required under section 250.2A, as I mentioned before, rather than the administrative approval of shared parking, section 250-3H is not applicable. And so the approval recommendation and the condition that goes with it has to do with a straight reduction from 60 to 10. So in detail, the development should be constructed in substantial conformity with the site plan and the elevation plan, and the hours of operation as specified in the letter of intent submitted to the Planning and Development Department dated and received on December 6th of last year, with revisions required by conditions of approval and compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance as reviewed and approved by the Planning and Development Director. The driveway entrances along Longview Drive shall be reduced to 20 feet in width. So staff noted that there are two. Staff would recommend keeping the two as long as they are reduced in width at the throat at 20 feet. And the applicant shall replace the existing safety railing at the intersection of Longview Drive and Admiral Drive at the intersection with a fence that's decorative material and shall be 50% transparent. Furthermore, the mulch area, the mulch play area on the site shall be constructed outside of the 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer setback and shall be constructed of pervious material. In addition to the 10 parking spaces required on site, the applicant structure, in addition to the 10 parking spaces required on site that are on site now, the applicant shall provide 50 parking spaces within 475 feet of the applicant's structure, and the provision for the 50 designated parking spaces shall meet the following conditions. This is somewhat extensive, but staff finds that it's somewhat important to get the details right on the conditions that allow for a reduction of parking on site and potentially seeking that parking elsewhere in the area. First, I'll say that the 475 feet comes from the distance between the building and the farthest extent of the adjacent properties parking across the street. It also includes roughly the area of the Chamblee Plaza or Publix parking lot. That walk is just under 2 minutes if you walk at a regular pace. The proposed conditions, as I mentioned, there's a parking study conducted by a professional engineer shall be provided in order to demonstrate that both the applicant's use and the existing use where they're going off-site will be designated and will provide adequate parking capacity at all times. And that the study shall include a map to scale, which indicates the location of the proposed parking spaces. The parking map shall indicate or notate a number of spaces in each parking area. And the study shall document that the arrangement shall avoid conflicting parking demands and provide for safe pedestrian circulation and access. And this is standard for this kind of study. And the study shall include parking calculations. If parking is proposed for a combination of continuous properties, a plan must be submitted covering all the properties that will be sharing the parking spaces. And the study, including calcs, shall be submitted to our department for review and approval prior to issuing a building permit. Still more, cross easements shall be filed establishing access to the parking spaces in perpetuity and documentation of filing provided to the city. Parking agreements shall be fully executed and submitted to the department prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy for completion of the work on the building. And any subsequent change in land uses within the participating properties shall require proof that the adequate parking will continue to be available. So we're not only watching for what happens at the time of occupancy, but we're watching to see what happens if there's changes in the use of those properties. Prior to any change in use, the owner must apply to the department for an evaluation and confirmation of the change. And that's an ongoing condition, something that we manage on a regular basis. The applicant shall install 2 signs indicating that additional parking is available. The sign shall include location of on-street parking. The sign shall be maintained as a condition of a variance, and the final design and placement shall be approved by the planning department. So those will be signs that will be on the property so that if you enter, for example, and the parking is full in the 10 spots, the signs in theory will show people where the other parking is located. And then lastly, if designated parking spaces are located across Longview Drive from the applicant's property, then the applicant shall install a mid-block pedestrian crossing from the applicant's property to designated parking spaces. The final location and design of the crosswalk shall be reviewed and approved by the city engineer in our department. Thank you for listening to those conditions in detail, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of this item? Julie?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Julie Sellers, 1776 Peachtree Street. I, in Atlanta, Georgia, have the privilege of representing the property owner and applicant before you tonight. Would like to start by just thanking each of you and the staff. We have about a year ago, have been working on this, and I wanted to just sort of off the bat acknowledge that we are seeking a reduction in the required on-site parking. The staff has proposed 5 conditions, and we are in agreement with conditions 1 through 4. It's condition 5 that I think that we have proposed an alternative condition that I think meets the spirit of the staff's concerns, but does it in a manner that will allow the organization to be able to have the parking spaces but not have some of the requirements. As you all know, property owners to give up parking spaces in perpetuity, we're just not confident. I don't have any hope that we're going to find somebody that's going to say you can burden our property forever. So this would allow us, it would obligate us to have shared parking spaces located within a half a mile. A half a mile is certainly a walkable distance, and not located where it would be a conflicting business. So say, for example, what we're talking about are really services starting Friday evening. So we're not going to be able, under the conditions we have proposed, to have shared parking with a nighttime dining establishment. That would certainly create, a conflict in parking. But I wanted to, before I get into the weeds of the proposed condition, I did want to acknowledge that our talented architect raised an issue, so I want to give him credit because I'm embarrassed I didn't think of it myself, and I should have. But when we look at how the city calculates parking, the code takes into an account the entire building. And so what I provided to the staff and to each of you is a comparison with, I think it was 6 or 7 other cities around, to just compare. A lot of places measure the parking based on the size of the sanctuary. And so that's the largest meeting space, which sort of makes sense. That's where your people are going to congregate. They're going to meet for the worship services. We are not going to have people at full occupancy that would take up the social hall and the sanctuary at the same time, for example. But that isn't taken into account with the city's parking regulations. So that's how we get to that number of 62 spaces. If this same property was located in Sandy Springs, we'd be required to have 9 spaces, and we would be good to go because we've got at least 10. We think we can probably pick up 12, but it does range, but the highest, I think, was at 40 spaces in Dunwoody, but from 9 to 18 to 20 to 30, so just giving you sort of the perspective of how Chamblee's code might differ from some of the other codes. We also provided just the breakdown to help you understand, the classrooms that we have already limited the use of this property and have agreed to limit the hours of operation and the times when people will be using the facility. These, classroom spaces are for children while their parents are in the sanctuary, but yet we're having to provide 41 parking spaces for kids. So just to help you and maybe the public understand, when we're really looking into how did we get to that requirement of 62 spaces, when you really look at the details, in addition to what we'll talk about in a little bit, just the needs of the congregation, we are held to a pretty high standard for the number of parking spaces. Again, we have already limited the use of the property. It is not frequent that you all have property owners that come in and say, let me just voluntarily restrict, but that was done in an effort to work with the city to really acknowledge and be a partner with the city on not wanting to create traffic congestion at, sort of the peak hours of the day, and certainly not to have an influx of cars that would create more congestion for the residents in the community. I'd like to just talk through the proposed condition number 5. I do want to try to do this quickly because I know we have people here to speak in support, but our proposal is very similar in a lot of ways to the staff's proposal. The location of the off-site parking spaces is R5A. That is a half a mile from the property as measured on the GIS. So it provides some specificity to how we measure it. The agreement it details when the property, those shared spaces can be used and providing that minimum. One of the things that I want to say, under these conditions, we're obligated to have these additional spaces, and should something change with the spaces where we have an agreement, we've got to find those spaces somewhere else. So it's our obligation to always maintain those number of spaces, but it gives flexibility to locate those spaces in different places over the years as things may change. Again, C is the off-site spaces are not located on a property with a primary business operations in the evening. D is very similar to the staff's recommendation of F, which is installing the 2 signs that advise that there are additional parking spaces available. We did say that the location of the off-site spaces would be emailed to the members. We were a little concerned about posting the location on the signage, and really we don't want to be inviting other people in the public to go use somebody else's parking spaces. We want that for members should there be a need, even though at the heart of it we don't think that there will be a need for these shared spaces. If there's a change in use, then we'll have to come back to the city to confirm the parking is the same. We will provide the parking easements or agreements satisfying the conditions to the development department prior to a certificate of occupancy. That was in the staff condition number C. And then staff condition number G is pretty similar to our condition G. If our off-site spaces that we're using are on the opposite side of Longview, then we will work with the city's engineer in installing that pedestrian crosswalk. If the city engineer confirms that it will not create an unsafe condition and the city engineer determines that location, we had concerns about the staff's wording that it might lock us in, and we want the engineer. I'm not an engineer, my clients are not engineers. We want that determination made by the city's engineer. And then H is, if we are able, we think that it's highly likely we'll be able to actually have 12 parking spaces on site. So if we're able to have more than 10 spaces, then the 35 additional spaces would be reduced by the number of additional spaces. So if we are able, I didn't want to commit to it because it looks good on paper based on the drawings, but until you really get into it, it may not work. So, but wanted to just acknowledge if we're able to get the 12 on site, then the required number of off-site would be reduced. That ends my presentation. I would like to go ahead and turn it over. I know that we have a few people here to speak in support of this, and I would welcome them to join me at the podium now.
Anyone wishing to speak in favor?
Just for housekeeping purposes, we have about a minute 10 left for public comment. Not public comment, but pros.
Okay, I can do it in a minute or less. Hi everyone, my name is Michael Fingerman. I live at 4070 Forrestal Drive, and it's nice to see you all again. And we were here 11 months ago having the same conversation, and I just want to reiterate a few points that I was able to share last time. And I just want to start off firstly with thanking you and thanking Julie, because I can feel, and I hope you all can feel, like we really want to make this work. Like we are really hoping for your approval because it's really important to our community, which I want you to know already exists. There are Jewish members of your community who live in Hunley Hills and the surrounding Chamblee area. There's not as many of us as you might think, so we are a small minority community, and it's important to us that we have this synagogue within walking distance of our homes. I already walk down Longview Drive all the time to go to Publix, to go to Chamblee Plaza, and and I'm currently walking around our neighborhood going to my fellow Jewish community members' homes for to celebrate holidays and to share meals together and to be with our families. So it would be tremendous for us to have a space to do that that really dignifies the value we place in having Jewish community within walking distance of our homes. A few other points that have been brought up that I just want to drive home that, right now it's
We're at
really
10 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to extend the time by 5 minutes, including rebuttal.
Second.
A motion and a second to extend by 5 minutes. Everybody okay with that?
Do we need to take a vote? No, we're by consent? Okay. Let's make sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. A few other points that just, come to mind when I think about how badly we want this space to be approved as a synagogue for our community. It's already such an eyesore, and, walking down Longview Drive and having to walk past that, I know and have faith in the Colwell Center that they're going to really make this a beautiful corner for everyone in our community with the addition of sidewalks. I know the parking continues to be an issue, and I've mentioned the walking distance piece is really important to us. That's not something that we take lightly, so I understand that. And as it relates to traffic that could be of concern when I think about that corner, when I drive to work and pass that corner every day, on the way to work and on the way home, I've never once sat behind another car at the stop sign, and courteously let the next person drive by, and I can guarantee you, because of the walking nature of our community, that's not going to be an increased concern. I just want to say, last, to wrap up my little minute plus, we're really praying here that this gets approved, because it's really that important to us, because I feel like approving the synagogue and this improvements that the synagogue will bring to the community will bring joy to the community, and I think that's what all of our communities need a little bit more of. So thank you all so much for your time.
Anyone else here wishing to speak in favor?
I live across the street from Mr. Joseph Shapiro at 3834 Commander Drive, and I just want to give my support. I'm just here to tell you that and kind of reiterate on what he said. I am a witness. I do see the walking. It's a lot of walking with the community, so I just want to make sure that is taken into account, and that's their laws, and I see how devout they are to it, and so they definitely will do a lot of walking, and I can see that I know it's not according to the law, but to theirs it is, and it's very important to them. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Come on up.
Thank you. I'm Melody Euchman, 1990 Commodore Lane, Chamblee, Georgia. I'm a little nervous. I'm not speaking on behalf of myself, but, I follow the mayor and Jimmy on Facebook and Nextdoor, and there's a lot that, you propose on your postings and things, but two things that come up a lot is about diversity in our area and sidewalks. And, I think having this building, this Colwell, will definitely build on the diversity, and it will help the people because of all the sidewalks that are so important. My rabbi is here, so if I make any mistakes on this, I apologize. Besides the Sabbath weekly, we have 12 major holidays. Tonight is one of them. Tonight and Hanukkah, there are no restrictions for driving. So if this building was operational, people would come to the shul tonight. But other than that, the other holidays are like no driving, except for some of the intermediate days of Passover and Sukkot. So, but the first 2 days and the last 2 days of both of those weekly holidays are also no driving. So really, it does feel like everybody, and I understand, because my big argument has always been about the parking on my street because of the Airbnb, so I have compassion for that concern. But I really do think, knowing this community, I moved down here 30 years ago. I met Rabbi Silverman at that time. I go to Ariel, which is an Orthodox synagogue, even though I am not. And I know how that synagogue operates, and I know that the bulk of the people are going to be not like me. They're going to be walking, and they want this because they don't want to be, we have a restriction that if you say prayers, there should be 10 men as a minyan. And so in order to fulfill all these rituals that we have, it's just going to be a blessing. It's going to be such a blessing. And this community, it will really help, the community come together to pray, to mourn, to celebrate. and to reach out to do good for other people, not Jewish. I mean, we do a lot of things just like churches and other, religious organizations do. So it's not just to take care of ourselves. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How
I'm
are
going
we
to
on
listen to
time?
the Megillah tonight.
Got 1 minute if anybody else wishes to speak in favor. Anybody? All right, anyone here to speak in opposition this evening? Come on up. Sorry about that sunlight.
Oh, it's great. My name is Steve Smoke. I own 3700 Longview, directly across the street from the subject property. I'm also an architect, so we do site selections for clients all the time. I mentioned in last month's meeting, as I did over a year ago, that an assembly occupancy needs the off-street parking. When you look at the building, and the gentleman who ran his office is there for a year. I mean, it's been vacant now for over a year. He had 5 parking spaces out front, and he tried to work in a ambulatory parking space for a 6th space. He does have access to the rear, but they typically don't use it. Whenever I hear about possibly 150 people showing up on a Wednesday night, or knowing that we have a lot of access on Saturdays for worship, that's great, but I don't see where we're going to place parking. I look at other synagogues on a Saturday morning, and their parking lots are full. So I would ask Jeff, who's an engineer, to come up and talk to issues of residential nature, being living on Admiral Drive, and let him speak to trying to get in and out of the neighborhood now with all the problems that we have already on Admiral with the consulate. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of the council. My name is Jeffrey Chu. I live at 3768 Captain Drive, or at the corner there. I'm excited that the synagogues, that is coming to the neighborhood, but I don't think this is quite the location. My background is a civil engineer in land development. And our big concern, it seems like I was late, so I'm sorry, I missed a lot of it, but it sounds like a lot of the parking issues have been discussed. And so, like Mr. Smoke said, the problem is previous discussions have said up to 150 people during the week. That's my personal big concern. I don't know where they're going to park. Obviously, it's not 150 cars, but I mean, if you do the math, and being the math nerd that I am, that's about 2,000 feet of road you need, assuming 20 feet a car at 150. Anyway, so but that aside, I take the consulate up at the top of the road on Admiral as an example. For those of you who have driven there at 9 in the morning, which I think some of these classes were going to take place, it's crowded. I mean, people are, it's a similar driveway setup where you have entrance and exits. I'm worried that, they're going to clog up traffic. I've seen traffic backed up all the way down the hill, on Admiral through that intersection, and it's like when I'm trying to get to Chamblee Dunwoody to get to work, it's like I can't go this way, so I have to go through Huntley Hills to come out the back way, and adds like 10 minutes to my trip, just not so I don't have to deal with that. I feel like this is the similar situation we're going to end up here with that many cars or coming into during non-Sabbath trips. The second issue is it's a little, I don't know if you've ever walked there at night. It's a nice walk, like people have said, but the concern I have is that, being the Sabbath, I know you dress more conservative, darker clothes, and it's dark in there on that street. So people who aren't paying attention, I worry about the safety of those pedestrians. But and the third thing I'm worried about is the curb cuts in the driveway. Are you going to be able to get the egress and ingress that you need for emergency vehicles should they be needed? And are you going to be able to have vehicles driving in and out? Like the consulate, you have this very tight space, and people are all trying to get in or out, and they're blocking the road or blocking this or trying to do a U-turn, and at the end, it kind of promulgates all the way up and down the street onto Chamblee Dunwoody. And so this is a similar situation you're going to end up here as well, unless, they can show otherwise. I haven't seen that kind of documentation from their traffic engineer or any of the traffic studies. So, but those are the three things that I had at this point with having the development of an institutional facility in the area. So thank you very much.
Wishing to speak in opposition? Nobody? All right. Julie, you got 59 seconds.
I usually talk so fast, and I talked way too slow tonight, so my rebuttal will be fast. Just a few things in regard to what we just heard. I want to highlight the fact that 150 is based on room occupancy. As the site plan shows, we have 84 seats in the sanctuary. This is a Orthodox Jewish community, and the people that are abiding by the Orthodox rules and regulations are not driving. That is the whole purpose of locating a small neighborhood-size gathering space in a neighborhood, is to be accommodating to the religious beliefs and practices of this community that is already in the neighborhood. We've heard from one of several members tonight. This is a holiday, so if it wasn't a holiday, we would have had a lot more people here, but they are observing the holiday, and we appreciate the folks that did join us. As far as the safety...
Fellows, we're at time.
Okay, we are installing sidewalks.
Very good. All right, we will move on to the next item. For those not familiar, this does come back up in the agenda later on. Council may or may not have questions at that time. Next item on the agenda is PZ 2025-1403. This is 3063 Claremont. This is the Hilton Garden Inn Development of Community Impact.
Mayor and council, we have an interesting application before you. This is concurrent development of community impact, which requires your review, plus variances and waiver requests. This is a proposed hotel on Claremont, and what's at stake here are several variances and several waivers, but then also the development of community impact review based on design review board findings. So what I'd like to do in this presentation, there is a lot to unpack. I'd like to give you all details of the site through this presentation, and then responses to the requests under consideration in detail, the variances and the waivers. The design review board findings from February 2025. The staff recommendations for the variances and waivers as it regards criteria for both, and then the overall recommendations should the council move towards approval of this development. So I appreciate your patience on this. This is a construction of a 99,700 square foot, 7-story hotel, about 75 feet tall, for 158 guest rooms. The sign posted on the site noted 155, but I'm correcting that as 158 guest rooms with a ground level coffee shop. There are 2 uses here in accordance with the mixed use business center zoning district, which it finds itself in. So let's talk about the location. If you are driving from Beaufort Highway towards I-85, south on Claremont, this is between Century Place and Century Boulevard. Right now, this is a somewhat wooded site, would be on your left-hand side or the east side of Claremont. I want to come back to the applicant's request after we have a chance to go over the site. These are views of the frontage along Claremont Road. Again, if you're driving towards I-85, it would be on your left-hand side. There used to be buildings there for many years. Those buildings are gone. There are some remnants of them. There are still a lot of trees, especially on the north side towards Buford Highway. The site is notable for how it slopes from Claremont down towards 1800 Century Boulevard, or the Triangle Building. Again, this is what I'm trying to describe on the site. There's various remnants of the last development and various views of the site. You see the 1800 Century Boulevard building there on the right-hand side. The development parcel is put together with the assemblage that you see in the lower left, and you see how it frames in between the Lakes development to the south and Century Place to the north. There is a existing slip lane into Century Place if you're driving north on Claremont. The road sort of widens there if you're driving up north there. A couple of years ago, not to be confused with prior site plan review, with the same hotel flag, Hilton Garden Inn, this is the 2020 site plan, which is quite different than the one we're looking at today. And these were the elevations from that plan. This is the proposed site plan as it originally came in. And you have a number of different things happening on the site. The parking to the far left corner with landscape strips as required by the ordinance for the most part. And then to the far right corner, you have private open space. There's also private open space located adjacent to the building center right. There's supplemental zones in orange, and there's dedicated sidewalk areas in gray shade. And there's landscape zone in the light green there towards Claremont Road. You'll also see, in addition to the slip lane that already exists to the far left corner, in the far right corner you find a proposed GDOT slip lane, which is required by the Georgia Department of Transportation. I don't have to remind the council members that this is a state road, and the city border runs right up to the edge of that road at the subject property. There is one way in and one way out, a 24-foot wide entranceway, and the applicant has proposed a turnaround area for drop-off in front of the main entrance of the hotel, as well as 7 parking spaces adjacent to the supplemental zone and the landscape zone closest to the proposed coffee shop, which is in the corner, the far right corner of the building. The X at the center left of the parking indicates an area where the stormwater detention basin will be located underneath the parking. This is a very crowded look at the dining terrace area and what's being proposed there. What's notable is the tree preservation that's being proposed for the trees that are there, and the parking for what we're calling the parking pod to the left of this dining terrace. There are more site details, and I believe we have a grading plan and the landscape plan. There's there's some sort of greenery on 4 sides of this development, with quite a lot of tree save on the far left or north side of the site. And there are trees being proposed as required within the parking lot. Here are the elevations for the proposed hotel building. The back elevation. This is towards Claremont. The right elevation, which is from the Lake Office Park. As you get an idea of what the building will look like. These were provided to us from the application. So as mentioned, I want to go back, now that you have a chance to know what is being proposed. I want to go back to the exact applicant request with regard to variances and waivers. The applicant requested to reduce the required minimum parking from 190 to 165 spaces and to allow parking between the building and the street. This is the parking area that would be located next to the dining terrace for the coffee house establishment. Next is a variance to not provide wheel bumpers for a portion of the parking spaces that do not abut a curb or sidewalk. Our ordinance requires that there's a 5-foot landscape strip between parking areas. If you don't provide that, the ordinance calls for these wheel bumpers to be located. The applicant would like to remove that as well, so that longer type vehicles such as RVs and customers pulling trailers can park more easily. And then a variance from section 310 to encroach in the 50-foot undisturbed and 70-foot 5 no impervious stream buffer. There is a stream buffer on the site that runs from the northeast to the southeast through the site, and it has been for years mostly piped underground. It daylights only briefly for a small portion of the site in the middle. The applicant requests 7 waivers from Title III of the UDO. These are the non-public hearing requests with a different set of criteria. And this is to reduce a portion of the landscape zone from 10 feet to 0 feet. A waiver from Section 230.26 to reduce a portion of the sidewalk zone from 10 feet to 6 feet. A waiver from Section 230.26 to not provide a supplemental zone for portions of the streetscape. And then a waiver to not locate the building adjacent to the supplemental zone for a portion of the site. And all of these things were shown on the previous slide where I indicated the different open space, landscape zones, and sidewalk areas between Claremont and the parking lot and the hotel itself. 3 other waivers required or requested by the applicant to not provide a 5-foot grass strip with a curb for a head-to-head parking for a portion of the site. I've mentioned this in relationship with the customers who want longer parking. And a waiver from Section 350-2 to not meet the minimum driveway spacing of 294 feet on a road with 40-mile-hour speed limit. This is an existing condition that exists between Century Boulevard and Century Place, as I pointed out in the site plan. This site sits right between there, and it doesn't meet that requirement. And then last is to not provide interparcel access from an adjacent parking lot in the form of a continuous driveway. And this is something that'll come up later in the findings. So as I mentioned, as a development of community impact, This obviously went to the Design Review Board in February, a month before this hearing, as is called for in the UDO. And I want to go through the Design Review Board findings. These findings are separate and non-binding and somewhat separate from the staff. So the board made no recommendation on variance 1. The board recommended that applicants explore reconfiguration of the parking lot between the building and the street to investigate if nodes-in parking could eliminate the need for a variance, and to ensure that that parking pod works with circulation and a queuing standpoint. And that is the turning movement from Claremont into the site and then into the parking area for the coffee shop. And then third, the board recommended approval of the variance with condition that it be limited to a maximum of 16 spaces for the areas for longer parking. The board made no recommendation for variance 4, that being the stream buffer. And then the board recommended approval of waiver requests with the condition that the streetscape should remain consistent by reducing the sidewalk clear zone to a minimum of 6 feet wide and a landscape zone to 4 feet wide across the entire frontage, except at the northern and southern end where the existing trees are to be preserved and where the new streetscape is to tie into adjacent sidewalk. So I'll expand on that. The Design Review Board looked at the proposal by the applicant and modified it to make it more uniform, reducing that landscape area and that sidewalk area to make it more uniform and organized rather than trying to meet the letter of the ordinance and resulting in something that's a little bit disorganized, is the best way I can put it. So they're reducing those metrics in order to create areas that are more uniform in appearance and function. Next is waivers 3 and 4, having to do also with the topic I just talked about with regard to the building adjacent to the supplemental zone and not providing supplemental zone for portions of the streetscape. Next, the applicant shall provide a minimum 6-foot wide sidewalk and 4-foot wide landscape across the entire frontage instead of 10. And then waiver 5, the board motioned to combine this recommendation with variance 3. These are all related. For waiver 6, the board made no recommendation. This is this has to do with the site distance. And then waiver 7, the board recommended approval of the waiver with the condition that if any adjacent parcels are developed, the owner must provide access easement and a construction easement in order to achieve interparcel connectivity at the time of redevelopment of the adjacent parcel. So this takes it into the future. This proposes a condition that if adjacent parcels redevelop, interparcel access will still be pursued. The board recommended the following as well. The variance permitting the omission of head-to-head landscaping shall be strictly confined to 16 parking spaces located within the first row of the parking area. And the applicant shall provide a minimum 6-foot wide sidewalk clear zone and a 4-foot wide landscape zone across the entire frontage of Claremont Road, except at the north end and south end where the existing trees are to be preserved and the sidewalk is to be tied into the adjacent sidewalk. And then if an adjacent parcels are developed, the adjacent owner shall provide access and construction easements to provide interparcel connection at the time of redevelopment and the adjacent parcel. The applicant shall provide additional architectural details on the north and east facing facades by providing more variation in materials that are consistent with the proposed material palette. So the applicant made some strides in that area, but the Design Review Board wanted more of it. And those are the Design Review Board findings from February. Staff's role is to bring these to your attention and also to bring to your attention the waiver and variance requests as they relate to the criteria for variances and waivers. Those criteria differ, as you know. Section 300-8 provide the criteria for waivers, and Section 280-24 provide the criteria for variances. So these strictly looking at the criteria, this is what the staff findings are. That in those areas, variance to reduce the required minimum parking from 190 to 165 spaces is warranted due to the overall size of the property. I'll also note that occupancy rates, generally speaking, from a quick look at the industry, are about 60% on normal times, and so the reduction is only 13%. So staff finds additional comfort in recommending approval of that variance. Variance from Section 310 to encroach in the 50-foot undisturbed and 70-foot impervious surface stream buffer. So we find this is an existing condition, and we've consulted with the city engineer and the city's stormwater manager. A waiver to reduce a portion of the landscape zone from 10 feet to 0 feet, and also the associated waivers that have to do with the supplemental zone and the sidewalk and the location of the supplemental zone in relationship to the building. We also support not providing a 5-foot planting strip for a portion of the site, again, due to the size of the building, the size of the lot. And then staff supports not meeting the minimum driveway spacing of 294 feet on a road with a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit, as this is an existing condition between Century Place and Century Boulevard. Now, staff recommends denial on the following three: to allow parking between the building and the street. This is somewhat key because this is a principal tenet of the applicant's proposed parking pod for the coffee shop. Staff does not find a hardship for that. Second, a variance to not provide wheel bumpers for a portion of the parking spaces that do not abut curb or sidewalk. So we find that if you don't have the landscape strip that provides pervious areas and also landscaping for cooling and also a natural barrier between cars, then you should have, for safety, the bumpers. They're not proposing either one, so we can't find a hardship there. And then last is a waiver from to not provide interparcel access from adjacent parking lot in the form of a continuous driveway. So strictly speaking, we see the opportunity to do that. The applicant, to be fair, has worked diligently to achieve that interparcel connectivity. We find that our conditions that you'll hear about address that pretty adequately. But strictly speaking, from a waiver point of view and the criteria, staff doesn't recommend that be waived. So now, in conclusion, should the council desire to approve the project, here are the composite recommendations going forward. And these take into account much of what the Design Review Board has found with regard to the site. Of course, as we usually do, development shall be approved in accordance with the plans submitted and revised. The applicant shall in good faith negotiate interparcel connectivity with the adjacent neighbor, as it has, to the north and east of the site prior to application for a land disturbance permit. And that would be going to Century Place or out towards 1800 Century Boulevard or the Triangle Building. Should interparcel access be provided, the entrance from Claremont Road would remain open. We are not requiring that to be closed. And the applicant shall limit the omission of head-to-head landscaping to 16 parking spaces located within the first row of the parking area. That would be something that maybe a portion of the parking lot could be dedicated to, and the applicant shall install permeable pavement within these areas only as a form of mitigation. Should interparcel access not be granted, the applicant shall provide a minimum of 6-foot wide sidewalk clear zone and a 4-foot wide landscape zone across the entire frontage of Claremont. If any adjacent parcels are developed, the owner shall provide access and construction easements to provide an interparcel connection at the time of redevelopment of the adjacent parcel. So this goes into the future. And the applicant shall provide additional architectural details, as I mentioned before, on the north and east facing facades by providing more variation in materials that are consistent with the proposed material palette. This is 100% consistent with the Designer Review Board. And then the applicant shall install an additional walkway from the parking islands to provide safe access to the coffee shop, should that coffee shop have the kind of parking next to it. And the applicant shall provide additional access to underground detention systems for future inspection and maintenance per engineering. And lastly, public art shall be reviewed and approved by the Public Arts Commission, as we've done before. Thank you for hearing this through. It's important, I think, for the public and for the council to see the details of the site, the requests that are being made, and there are many by the applicant, the Designer Review Board findings, the staff findings where the criteria for waivers and variances are at play, and then the overall recommendations, should you continue to consider this. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. All right, anyone here wishing to speak in favor of this item, come on up. Just a reminder, give us your name and address. Tell us how you're related to the project.
My name is Daniel Lemberg. I'm the architect of record for the project. That's a lot of dry facts that you've been presented, but I'm hoping we have access to the renderings that were presented for this development. There's 7 professional renderings.
There are. I can cue them for you.
I think you went too far back. Just the, yeah. So as you approach the building, and you saw in the pictures that they took, there's a grove of mature trees. There are gum trees, some pine trees, and what we would propose to do with our mixed-use space is develop a walkable coffee shop that has an outdoor terrace. It's integrated with the building hotel lobby so that it will have some activity from the hotel and hopefully some activity from the pedestrians and bicyclists that are coming along the street. It's tucked in between the building because that's where our mature trees are, and that's why we've asked for the setback to have the building not directly on the supplementary zone. We've made the function of that supplementary zone the landscape terrace with dining. The next rendering, that's looking back at the building after you've gone past the entrance drive. You can see the dining in front, and as we proceed along Claremont, we have our other feature. We divided the supplementary zone instead of one long 10-foot wide linear strip, which is the way the zoning reads, into 3 modules. The dining terrace, which is our major one, and we've met all of the square footages that were set up in the zoning. The next one is the public art, and we focus that around existing mature trees. And wish there was a way to zoom in. The artist did a kind of fanciful job of some sculpture, but we have not really determined whether that sculpture is railroad related, like a sculpture made out of old railroad parts, or it might also just focus on the third element of the supplementary space, which would maybe be the next slide, which is the existing bus stop, which would be replacing with what we're proposing as a smart bus stop. Don't know whether you have the technology here yet to support it, but it would be answering questions as to when the next bus is going to be, how to get from point A to point B, and it would be a glass enclosure, and wrapped behind it is a feature area of a butterfly habitat. Since that area of the site has a lot of redevelopment that's needed, we're proposing to select specimens of trees and plants that would encourage the congregation of butterflies. And so possibly the art in the public art would be based on butterflies. On the glass panels of the bus stop, we would be presenting information about what butterflies are local and more information about their life cycle. So it's not that we're trying to circumvent any part of the zoning regulations. We're hoping that we've taken them to heart, and we've hopefully taken the site conditions that were faced, which have prevented any development of this site, which has been in the same ownership, but just impossible to make profitable because of all of the restrictions in the topography and just everything about it, the fact that we needed to price out another concept by another architect that came in with $4 or $5 million of site work, and a hotel, even a Hilton, like the Hilton Garden Inn, still has to make money, otherwise it will fail. So this is, I was brought in to see if we could tame the site, but I also think we've improved the site quite a bit. We still have issues to resolve. Highway Department still hasn't given us final approval on length of decel lanes and the like, but we think we're close enough that whatever you approve tonight will be able to keep within close conditions with the final plans as they develop. I think that's pretty much my time.
All right, anybody else here wishing to speak in favor of this item? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? All right, again, this comes up later in the agenda. Council may or may not have questions at that time. Move down to the next item on the list. This is 1408. This is 3652 Chamblee Dunwoody Road.
Mayor and council, this is the third application of the night,
A
3650.
lot shorter, right?
Well, so if one is driving towards Dunwoody on Chamblee Dunwoody Road, just past the boulevard towards the high school, you'll find this address. And this is a variance in order to meet requirements to enclose dumpsters. In order to meet that requirement, the applicant requires a variance to install the commercial dumpster enclosure in the side yard. So you drive into the subject property. It's an L-shaped property. You would drive on a one-way driveway down through the business, and you'd turn left towards Pierce. It's really the only way to get to through the site. And then just before you get to Pierce, on the left in the corner, you'll find the existing dumpster. That dumpster will stay right in this area. So the applicant, Washington Design Group, owner Julio Hernandez, has brought this application and this variance before us. This is the subject site that I've been describing in the L shape. At the lower right-hand corner of that L, where it says Pierce Drive, is what we're talking about. That's exactly where the dumpster is and where it will remain. Here is the proposed enclosure. which we're agreeable with. And this is the location on a site plan. So the proposed enclosure will have three features. One, there will be paint indicating where it is located. It will be enclosed with a 7 to 8 foot structure, and it will be surrounded by landscaping. This is a set of pictures of the site. This is the dumpster in question. Staff recommends approval with conditions, and that is, as I've mentioned, plans in conformity with what was submitted, that the enclosure shall be constructed with a design and material similar to the complementary with existing primary structure on the site, and that evergreen landscaping shall be added adjacent to the enclosure to fully screen it from view from the public right-of-way, which is pretty close by there. I also noticed there's a sidewalk that ends strangely just before the intersection of the driveway and Pierce Drive. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Anyone here wishing to speak in favor of this item? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? All right. That will move us on down in the agenda. We have approval of minutes this evening. Did anybody see anything that needed to be changed? We are good. We'll have a second read of the UDO taproom amendment on Tuesday. That'll take us down to staff action items. We have the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. Who's doing that?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We're seeking approval of the resolution to support, join, and remain a member in the 2025 Mayor's Monarch Pledge. Participating cities must pledge and commit to a minimum of 3 action items. In the last 3 years, the city has achieved leadership circle status, completing 8, 13, and 18 action items in the respective years. The action items include educating and supporting the community to help restore the monarch butterfly habitat, which also benefits other pollinators. In 2024, we were the only city in Georgia to reach the leadership circle. Our goal this year is to complete 24 action items and make the Monarch Champion Circle. Any questions?
Question?
I do have a question. Are you aware of the Rosalind Carter Butterfly Trail? Or is it called a butterfly trail, I think?
Sure.
Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of it.
I would love it if we looked into that and extend beyond what we're doing in Chamblee and figure out a way to follow their criteria as well. She was, not is, but was, and it seeks to establish a corridor. And I would love to see if there's, I would like some recognition for doing that as well with them, so.
I think that we'd be delighted to do that, and I'm sure that Lori Conway, our Grounds and Green Space Manager, would be totally ecstatic about that.
Yeah, let's do that, because I think that would really extend our reach.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, that'll take us down to Downtown Development Authority appointments.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 3 appointments for the DDA that you guys must consider. There are 2 appointments that are up for term, as well as your council member appointment. So we have provided some of those applications in the packet for tonight. The rest came in by the deadline yesterday, so those were emailed out to you and will be included in the packet for your consideration for Tuesday.
Very good. Questions on that? All right. Municipal Court staffing and position reclassification.
Going to have Mr. Barry Anderson come up and speak on this item.
Right. Oh, Barry's here. Welcome, sir. Good evening.
Very experienced for me, so thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you guys. Pretty simple. Since I got here in 2022, we came in and we've had different leadership when it came down to the police and staffing as well. Well, time has come. I know me and Jimmy have talked about the sessions that we've had, and the volume of citations, and along with the focus that code enforcement has put out there. Since 2022, our growth has been almost 50% in citations. We lost staff. We had our long-term court clerk retire, had a baby, wanted to go home and be with her baby, so she left us last March. We tried to employ some part-time employees, and that didn't quite work out as we thought it would. But to put everything into context, we went from handling about 4,000 citations a year in 2022. In 2024, that number went to 7,373. And the bottom line is, with my current staffing, we have kind of reached our limits. Thus, this request that I hope will be granted.
Questions on this item? All right, Barry, good job.
Kristen, how would that work? I mean, is this a budget amendment that's going to need to be made, or how is this?
No, right now, we need to add the positions. I believe it's a deputy court clerk position. So we're taking those, we're reallocating existing positions to the deputy court clerk positions to make them co-equal. So all this request really is for this evening, or for Tuesday's consideration, is to add that position to our list of approved positions and job classifications. Barry and I have chatted about the budgetary availability to hire his additional person, and we're going to look at that, but I don't believe at this time it will require a budget amendment.
Any other questions? All right, good job, Barry.
Thank you.
The balanced design, phase 2.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to make a note that it looks like in our software system, I attached the proposed design, but it looks like it didn't actually attach it. It lists it in the action item as an attachment, but it didn't show up, so I'll make sure I get that to you guys for reference. But a couple of years ago, as we were finishing out City Hall, we had included an additional scope of work for some interior design to kind of add to the space. It was very empty when we moved in here, as you recall. And we wanted to make it a little bit more of a community feel, especially in the lobby area and some of the publicly accessible areas. Over the last 2 years, we did one scope, which was about $250,000 to bring in the furniture and a few of the mural wallpaper spaces that we have, and some rugs and that sort of thing. And phase 2 was originally proposed to be an additional $250,000 scope. That work was reallocated to address some of the noise issues in this space last year, and it was not subsequently rebudgeted for 2025. We've gone back and asked Balanced Design, who has been our partner with this, to revise the scope for the remaining pieces that we feel like are most important to finish out this space. The first being a public art space, a gallery space for public art to highlight community art in City Hall, as well as celebrating some of the achievements of the city, and some additional seating, art, and other spaces to kind of just fill out the remaining interior spaces in the public areas of City Hall. So the revised proposal is for $75,495. I wanted to note that I have about $71,000 in the bond fund remaining, so the balance would essentially be that $5,000 that we need to find. But before we move forward with that, I wanted to make sure that you guys were good to go with that, and wanted to put that back in front of you for your consideration.
Very good. Any questions on this item? Good job. Business licensing software. Julie, I knew you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Julie Pirro, Finance Director. Is somebody clicking for me? Oh, thank you. As you may recall, back in December, staff requested a one-year extension with our current vendor, HDL, while Finance conducted research to identify a suitable replacement for transitioning our business and privilege licensing to an in-house service. Over the past several months, Finance has met with several vendors and has now made a final selection. According to our contract with HDL, a 6-month notice is required to terminate the agreement. Therefore, it is essential to make a timely decision to make this deadline and ensure preparations are in place to start the licensing season in September. If the contract is approved at the next council meeting, we will plan to implement a 6-month process that will include data migration from HDL, the creation of a custom portal, the development of necessary interfaces and user training. The next slide, as Kristen has already moved to, shows the comparison of the vendors we evaluated and highlighting their respective pros and cons. GovOS platform, while they offer an automated excise tax and user-friendly interface, the costs are significantly high. And additionally, the platform lacks a customizable interface, meaning staff would be unable to make any changes without customer support. The MyGov platform offers competitive pricing and is a current vendor with whom we have an established relationship. It also would integrate seamlessly with our existing financial software. However, the platform is still in the startup stage, and it doesn't offer a customizable website. Furthermore, the city may experience price increases as the platform grows. And finally, OpenGov, which is already in partnership with our Public Works Department through Cartograph, and they're offering us a 38% discount. This platform would offer 100% customization of workflows by city staff and provide transparency to business owners, enabling them to track their progress in real time. It also supports the processing of our excise taxes and will generate delinquency reports if needed. Additionally, OpenGov facilitates direct communication between city staff and business owners through the portal to address any outstanding issues. Instead of right now, they have to call the switchboard, go down to California, come back to Chamblee. It'll eliminate all of that. The only downside was the professional services associated with OpenGov were relatively high, and the implementation process will be over several months. Next slide. In conclusion, Finance recommends, though, selecting OpenGov as it is the best option for serving both our current and future business owners. Staff is now requesting the authorization for the mayor to enter into an agreement with Cartosoft Technology, which is OpenGov, for software and implementation services not to exceed $162,811.75. The first year of the project will amount to $56,943.24, which will be funded through the FY 2025 budget allocated to the Finance Department. If you have any questions, I can address them at this time.
Questions for Julie? Anything? Good job. All right, this circles us back to 3715 Longview Drive. Was there questions or comments from council to staff or the applicant? Yeah, start with
All right,
them.
I'll dive in. This is for Julie or for the call itself. What's, if you don't mind, what's the current membership size of the call at this point? Roughly, and I'm not looking for exact. I mean, 20 people, 40 people?
I think because of the holiday tonight, we don't have, somebody, I will follow up with you. There is an organization, that has been meeting. I think that the numbers are, with the education classes in the evening, that's maybe 10, 15, 20 people that are, attending those classes. And that's really for, kind of young professionals continuing their studies in the religion.
The second half of that then is, in 5 years, what are they looking for the population of the congregation to be?
I think fitting within the plans that have been submitted, there's a recognition that it's not a large building. This building can never be enlarged. And so it could not grow to be a large organization. If there was a need for a larger space, they're going to have to find another location. There are I am not a member of the Orthodox Jewish faith, but I've learned a lot about it. And I can show you, even on the sanctuary plan that I handed out, the sanctuary is intentionally designed, and the seating in the sanctuary is men and women seat separately, and there are certain requirements, and Jay might be able to touch on this a little bit better, but for this religious organization, it's not, there are, the rules and regulations, that is at the heart of their faith. And so this is very intentionally designed and also limited in scope. And so it is a neighborhood location intended for people in the community to be able to walk. I think that if there is a larger need in the community, another location to have a second, I mean, that's kind of, you know, the growth of another organization would be formed to accommodate people that might live on, I'm going to get north, south, east, west, but say on the north side of Huntley Hills or in another part of the city, if there were people that would, you know, if population of people wanting to learn and practice the Orthodox faith grew, then another location could certainly be sought and established.
Anyone else?
I want to address a couple of things, and one of which, growth is definitely one of them. You just addressed that. The other one is traffic and parking, and that's a complicated site, and you have addressed that as well. However, I do want to talk about traffic. I know that you said that you never seem to wait in line at that light. I'm sorry, it's not a light. I wish it was, actually. A four-way stop, lots of people wait in line to get across that intersection, especially 2 times a day. It exists. There's a lot of cut-through traffic. We can't stop it. It's not illegal. So, and I think that the speed limit in Huntley Hills is 25, but it becomes 35 going up the hill. So there is that, and there are a lot of people that like to show off their ability to accelerate up that hill. All of that said, the safety of your parishioners, I'm sorry, I'm Catholic and that's what I call them, is certainly paramount. That's one thing, but also so is the safety of the neighborhood. And I've said this many, many times. The situation across from the high school is different from this situation because, but the parking situation and traffic situation is still complicated there. I feel like you've addressed it, and I feel like you have also addressed the, if changes were to occur, let's say that the temple was sold to a non-temple or whatever, all of that stuff gets revisited. So I feel like you have, in good faith, you have spelled that out in a way that is enforceable. And so I'm very happy with that. I think that the crossing part, the street crossing part of it from your shared parking, in my personal preference would be to make sure that your attendants walk down to the corner, not across the street directly, because that's just at the crest of a hill. And you can have a crosswalk in there, you cannot, it doesn't matter. Somebody coming over that hill's not going to see you doing 35 miles an hour before they possibly could hit you. So if we could make that one of the rules that your attendants have to follow, that would be really, really good. The only other thing is, and I'm not so sure that I'm going to complain too much about it because I do it myself, I park across the street from my side yard on Admiral, and it forces traffic. I don't park there permanently, but I do park. It forces traffic to siphon down to one lane. That's just all there is to it. So and during rush hour is when that's a problem. And I watch it, and I get it, and I see it. I don't think that rush hour is going to be an issue with the synagogue because that's not your hours. So what I'm trying to do in a roundabout way is say, you've answered my concerns. I really think that you have, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. it- Can I treat that as a little bit of a question, just to clarify on the rush hour? I know that there was some opposition, and concern about the rush hour traffic, and the staff condition, which we are agreeable, because we offered it up in the letter of intent, but just to be open about the restriction, is the organization has agreed it will not host programming at the property between 8 a.m. and 10:30 in the morning, to avoid, even for our small number of people, Monday through Friday, or between 4 and 6, Monday through Thursday. So that is, it was intentionally, because we heard that, the concern about the, rush hour traffic. And then, council member, on the evening classes, I did just pull the letter of intent. About 8 to 35 people for those evening classes, which would begin, after 6. They currently are anticipating, there's an event once a month for between 35 and 50 people, which may generate maybe 20 cars, but that's the range. So certainly in that, it's a focusing on increasing knowledge and faith through education, and then having the services for the Sabbath.
Anyone else?
So, my concern, well, not even a concern, just kind of a statement is, it sounds like we've addressed the day-to-day issues that could arise from this business, as far as the hours of operation and other things like that. Because most people are okay with a holiday or a random inconvenience, some big event. Most people, it's the daily interruption that people, and I think we've done a good job of addressing that and making sure like it's not going to be a part of somebody's daily life, the interaction of that. So I'm appreciative of that effort that was made. The other thing that is the crosswalk, and I kind of differ on Leslie's. But I do agree, and I believe the staff or somebody touched on it, but it says it's going to be evaluated by a professional. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what Leslie thinks, or it's what a professional engineer says, if it's safe to be there. I'm hoping that by our code that rapid rectangular flashing one, so you push the button and it brings extra attention. It's just not stripes on the sidewalk goes. I think our code requires that. Well, I think it does. But anyway, it might be a condition if it doesn't. But anyway, I want an engineer to make that determination. It's not what I think needs to be there. That's just my mindset on that. So, and I think, like I said, staff touched upon that.
And that's what we put in condition, our proposed condition
It was
G.
your condition. I knew I heard it somewhere.
Yes, is just that, subject to the city engineer confirming that said crosswalk will not create an unsafe condition, and determining the location for the crosswalk.
I concur.
Anyone else? Is that it? Okay, thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
All right, we are down to the DCI for 3063 Claremont Road. Any questions from council on this item?
So, I believe, Brian, that this project came up as in a previous version as a hotel, and there was a lot of talk about making left-hand turns coming out of the parking lot onto Claremont Road, and what could or could not be done to make it safe. I know there's a decel lane for incoming right-hand turns in the plans, and I think that was before, but the lefts of people exiting or entering would be a concern. And we had a lot of discussion about that in the previous version, and so I think these still apply with this site. We also had a lot of discussion about the interparcel connections for the property to the rear of this project, particularly. And I think that it used to be how we worded it was like, you can determine, we can't force the existing neighbor to accept where the interparcel connection goes in, but the next project can certainly, and I think that's why you want to establish, the applicant would want to establish where those are, so the next person would have to adapt to their plans, vice versa, just having like a big discussion back and forth. And I know you had some wording in there, but I didn't understand the language of exactly how it was explained, that, because it may not be an interparcel connection for 50 years, but there may be one in a month. We just don't know, depending on how the sites redevelop. So how currently are we addressing interparcel connections as far as something that may happen now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years, or 50 years from now? How is that kind of designated? Because we don't want that space just sitting there idle for an indefinite. It can be used for the parking in the meantime. I mean, I don't know how do y'all stub it out or whatever. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
Absolutely. So in the short term, before the permit's issued, or before occupancy, I think it's before the permit is issued, that interparcel connectivity is pursued by the applicant, and they've already begun to do that. So far, we don't have an agreement, but that's in the short term. In the long term, we do have a recommendation in the document now that proposes that should the council approve this, that condition would call for future connectivity if an adjacent parcel develops. Now, one of those connections is on Century Place, and that's a way, so that's not subject to that any changes. The other one is towards 1800 Century Boulevard, so only one of those two options really works. There's no connection available to the east towards I-85 because there's already a development there.
Yeah, I'm
and
talking
the
about,
whole building is.
from my memory, there's to the rear of the property and to the side, which is closest to that road that going in there.
Exactly.
Those were the two potential spaces, and it worked with the existing site, the previous existing site plan, and it looks like it may still agree. I just didn't know, again, how
And
that
then-
space was reserved for future
Yeah,
interparcel
and
connect.
we can certainly do that, and I think that I may be wrong, but I'm almost certain that the applicant is willing to do that as a condition of approval, as we have in there now.
Yeah, because I don't want to hold them, I I appreciate that they're trying to get it now and get
Yeah.
it, but sometimes that's beyond their control, because there's resistance from the neighboring properties that just don't choose not to participate, or they
Yeah.
hold up the process unnecessarily, so just, they don't, go ahead.
All you're asking for is a right-of-way, to reserve a right-of-way.
It's not really right-of-way, it's just an access easement and
Yeah, I'm
space dedicated
Yes.
on the site plan, on the record set of plans that show that connection. And we do that.
That's for future construction, so you don't disturb the trees and stuff like that at a later date. That's not
Right.
the same thing as this interparcel connection.
Right.
I understand why you did it, but it's not quite the same thing. Is that correct?
No, I think it's the same thing. It
is the same thing? Okay.
Yeah, it provides
All right.
that.
It seems to
And
me
then
like it should be a floating thing anyways. I mean, a percentage of the back lot line, but maybe reserve the whole lot line, so that supposing that the parcel behind it wants to develop, and they may not want a connectivity, probably would at the end of the driveway that goes through, but maybe they wouldn't, and maybe they'd want it somewhere else, just so long as it would work. It seems to me like that it shouldn't be restricted to one spot. It should be restricted to a percentage of the whole back line, property line.
We got the
So
civil
that
guy
it's
wants to
flexible.
chime in, so let's.
We can in a minute, yes, but I'd like to answer your first question,
Sure,
too.
sure.
Yeah. So we took your, Councilmember Robson, we have your point down, so that we can pursue that. But the first thing is, we did look, a traffic impact study was part of the application. And during the course of council briefings, we did go back and look at that. Surprisingly, there's only one recommendation, that is to continue the slip lane, and that's what's being proposed by GDOT. There will be, there's the existing slip lane that goes to Century Place remains in place there. But actually, kind of to my surprise, there was no restrictions on left turn movements or even concern about it. But that's just what a traffic impact statement said. There are trip generation numbers for AM peak hours. If you're curious, I have them right here, or I can send them to you after the meeting. What is curious is that they actually, for AM peak hour, the traffic impact report shows 46% going out in the morning and 55% going in at AM peak hour. It doesn't specify left or right, but I wanted to share that with you since you asked. There is concern about left-hand turns, and left-hand turns will be difficult in the morning peak hour, report or no report. So I think the applicant's kind of willing to live with that. But if one were at this hotel in the morning and you were trying to get out, it would be a lot easier to turn right than it would be to turn left.
Right. I can't remember how we addressed that in the previous project, but you might want to.
We can look.
Reference that. It seemed like I said we did a lot of teeth gnashing at that time, and it seemed like a lot of our questions were answered at that time. It's like, so it's probably the same answers and the same whatever. I just don't know. I don't remember for what we exactly came up with the last time, and if it was overly burdensome or I don't know. I mean, something didn't happen. I mean, Elmer, you drive over there all the time. Do you have any thoughts or? I mean,
I have a lot of thoughts.
Okay.
I have thoughts.
I'm sure you'll let me know.
No, I mean, it is a very challenging site. Actually, I happened to be out this morning running an errand, and I pulled in there just to kind of walk the site a little bit. And yeah, I mean, left turns either into that site or out of it are going to be difficult. Your morning trips, people leaving, the majority of people leaving are going to be making a left turn out because they're trying to get back to Interstate 85, most likely. About once a month, there is a good car accident right there, because there's a apartment property in Brookhaven across the street, Ivy Place, I think it's called. At least once a month in the afternoon, there is someone trying to make a left out of their driveway, and they have a collision with someone who is speeding down the turn lane, who's going to follow their Google Maps that's telling them to make the left into Century Center to beat the traffic back up. So, I mean, Google Maps, Waze, all that are directing a large volume of afternoon traffic down that turn lane. And on a bad traffic afternoon, that traffic is backed up all the way past Century Place, almost to the traffic light, even further up towards Buford Highway. And it's, a couple months ago, I had the highly entertaining experience of watching someone pull an illegal U-turn in the middle of Claremont Road directly in front of one of our police officers. I have never seen lights come on a car that fast. It is a problematic stretch of road, and the speed limit is 40. The functional speed of that road is around 50.
Yeah.
I have had people pass me in excess of 70 miles an hour on that road. So I have a lot of concerns with the only entrance point being in the middle of that block, just before another decel lane, where you also have an accel lane coming out of Century Center. So I was looking at this morning on the site. Someone coming out of Century Center making a right-hand turn, heading up the road, you have an acceleration lane for them. Now there's all of a sudden going to be a decel lane cutting in for people who are trying to slow down and make a right into this property. I foresee the body shops of the Chamblee metro area doing a very good business off of all of this. I think it's a complicated site. I understand the applicant's challenges. Again, I live right by it. I drive by it. On a good day, I only go past it twice a day. And I've been doing that for 20 years. I remember when it was Southern Tracks. So it's complicated. My other concern is we are going to strand a very narrow strip of land at Century Place that is now probably never going to be developed. It's a 30-foot wide strip that runs the depth of the applicant's lot, It's owned by Highwoods Real Estate. I don't know what you do with a 30-foot wide strip of ground. The renderings from the applicant look great. I don't know if they're going to try and have an agreement with Highwoods to take care of that property, but the butterfly garden is not going to look that nice and extend all the way to Century Place without such an agreement in place, because they don't own that land. Those are just some of my thoughts on it.
You know, and you brought back some vivid memories of our previous discussion from when this project had another life, because there was a lot of concerns about it.
So the last time this came up, I was simply a resident, and I know I emailed every single member of council with all of my concerns about this.
So it seems like part of that problem could be solved by GDOT allowing some modifications to maybe the turn lanes and stuff. I don't know exactly, but I mean, I know that's a GDOT road, but you know, I've seen where they don't allow you to drive the full length of Claremont Road in the turn lane. You know, I've seen where they've interrupted it and done different things. And again, I don't know if those are opportunities and if there's a place to do that. But you know, I know that sometimes there is a place to put a brake to do these things, but I just don't know if that exists, that opportunity is there. But
They recently shortened that, the acceleration lane coming out of Century Center. That's been shortened.
They repainted it.
Yeah.
That's all they did.
Yeah.
The asphalt is still there.
It's not
It's
shortened?
just striped.
right.
They
Is that
striped it
gore
shorter.
striping now? Is that what you're saying?
They added some striping, but people still use it.
What kind of striping though? Like lane striping or the gore stuff that just?
It's white
Crosshatch.
stripe checkout, just diagonal lines of
gotcha.
don't drive here. So
And
that's
I'm-
not all that effective.
I just want to be clear, I'm not trying to like find reasons not to do this project. I'm trying to solve some of the problems that might be associated with approving this project. So that's just, I'm not trying to throw, but,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I
Excellent
just.
points.
So anyway, yeah.
So, we've all been being told about this coffee shop, but I think I was maybe not paying complete attention. You've got a restaurant there as well. And,
Got what'd you say?
huh?
What did you say? I'm sorry.
They've got a restaurant there as well.
Oh, okay. Right.
And so you've got parking spaces for the coffee shop. I got a question about the elevations. But you also have a restaurant, and you got 161 rooms, 161 parking spaces. What do you expect do you only expect people to stay in your hotel to eat in this restaurant? Wouldn't you like to have some outside attendance as well? That's number one. Probably ought to address that first, and then I have a few more questions.
That was their mixed use. We brought it down to a small street-related coffee shop, and there's breakfast served at a Hilton Garden, but it's not an outside restaurant for public to come and eat. It's not for the public.
Bar. That's why I was looking at that. Okay, so, and then you have your breakfast area. Okay, I get that. Now, the parking, the property drops off, so you've got, I know that you got a retaining wall on at the parking lot. Is there also a retaining wall that drops this the coffee shop parking down? No?
The coffee shop
That
parking?
would be on the same level as the street? As the what? Okay.
If you're going to speak, please come to the podium so people at home can hear you.
It's, has to be separated from the sidewalk by 10 feet, and we're able to make the grade difference within that 10 feet without a retaining wall anymore. Because it's level with the raised terrace for the dining, so that there's a handicapped access directly from the parking.
It's a little bit lower at that point because if you're looking for the entry to the end, there's approximately 6 foot of drop. So it is level with just a little bit lower than the entry to the coffee shop area.
Master site plan?
It would, yes. And I mean, not to, but the landscape that is meant to be remaining is also going to
I get that. And you have entrances from the sidewalk to that coffee shop area, so that definitely goes along with your wanting it to be a neighborhood thing. And then how low is the parking lot across the driveway, the large parking lot? How, you've got a retaining wall in there.
Site's going to sit significantly higher than the area in the back. So the cross-access has to be all the way to the north, because that's the only spot where it'll be physically able to make a vehicular cross-access. So the parking lot will slip downhill, so you're coming down probably about 5 feet to get into the main parking area, which will be just slightly lower than the finished floor of the main entry, and then it'll vary by just a couple feet. So, but the main parking lot will be lower than the majority of the road.
There's a conference room on the lower level of the hotel, and a lot of times they want to have the ability to have a tent and outdoor weddings or presentations, but we're complementing it with enough indoor space that if it's inclement weather, you could move in. And we're not changing the grade, actually, at that level spot at all. It's where it's at, and it just shows you that it's 20 feet further down than the road is at the Claremont.
Anybody else? Questions, comments?
The only thing I want to add is I do appreciate the design of the front area, the sidewalk, and how you tried to integrate the existing trees and, and not just like we're going to go straight ahead and plow down everything that's 10 feet in front of us. It kind of has that meandering and softening. I really do appreciate that, the effort that was made for that. And so I just, whenever somebody does something that's like a little bit out of the box and to improve the site, I definitely want to say that I appreciate the effort.
The variances we were asking for is what had to be out of the box to make the site work and make it work better. So.
Out of curiosity, it's not germane to what's in front of us, but why wasn't this built the first time it was approved by council? Was this the third time? Third?
Tyler, representing the owners. That plan came out to around $55–60 million with the site work and the massive retaining walls that were going to be built. When the owner saw that, he had a change of heart and said, what can we do to do it again? So basically, we scratched that plan and hired a new architect and come up with something out of the box and keeping up with the ordinances.
Room, is this a smaller hotel? It seems like it's a smaller footprint, maybe, because it was turned differently, I believe.
The other one
It was 5 stories.
5-story.
How many rooms was that?
About the same.
Same key, hotel number key? Okay.
We're doing 7 stories at 158 now.
Gotcha.
If I read the packet right, the last iteration was 110-ish thousand square feet with about 10 less rooms. This one's just under 100,000 with 156.
Right.
I just have one request. I know that you're aware that that site used to house a recording studio, and there were some pretty big names that recorded there. One of my favorites, Bruce Springsteen. But I would love your art to reflect that a little bit, at least.
Like butterflies too?
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And finally, under staff action items, we have the 3652 Chamblee Dunwoody Road dumpster variance. Did anybody have any questions or comments on this?
That is a good-looking dumpster.
Was
That's
it-
all I'm saying.
Was it, it didn't come up in the presentation, but is there a rendering of, or a drawing of the proposed?
There's a schematic in there.
Got
It's CMU clad with brick, steel posts, metal gates. It's pretty much the boilerplate dumpster enclosure you'll find in any public bid document for any construction site.
So I don't want to wait for this to download. I keep having to do that. Can you pull up the site plan with the dumpster on it here?
That one? Oh, that one?
With the schematic with the dumpster on the site.
That one.
I don't care what the dumpster looks like.
That one?
I think these parking spaces, number one, are the one next to the building, they are that way, even though it's a one-way.
They're flipped in this image, the real life, yeah.
They are flipped.
That's what I was gonna ask about.
So we're looking at 10 feet between the, so this, okay, wait a minute. Okay. We're looking at, number one, that driveway at the entrance to this existing building is not that wide.
This is not to scale,
And
clearly.
that's a little bit of a problem. So I'm assuming that the dumpster guy is going to come in down this street and back up to get this dumpster. And you've got 10 feet, excuse me, between the curb and the corner of the dumpster. There are no sidewalks there. And yet that's a high school, and there's kids that walk down that street. I feel like that dumpster probably ought to get moved in a little bit more, because there's no room to put evergreen planting there and allow kids to walk up on a 10-foot, number one, whatever evergreens you're going to have there, they're going to be 10 feet wide or 6 or 7. So I feel like it needs to move in a little bit to allow for kids to walk on the.
And I was going to say the same thing. I think it's just a little too close to the road. I don't know how much it just needs to move in, but it just seems like it's just not enough.
Yeah,
It's
So, to be clear, your recommendation is to have it moved closer, farther north?
away from the
To
road.
the left in the picture,
To the left, okay.
over one parking space.
Can you provide some feet? We have 10,
Wider parking space is 7 feet?
about 8 feet. Okay.
At some point should admit the other. I frequent that, my chiropractor's there, and those spots down there at the end are rarely full. And I understand that they want to allow for it, and they have a requirement and all that kind of stuff, but I think they could lose one.
Very good. Any other questions or comments?
Well, going back, is there a right-of-way on that road? I know it's like, I know the right-of-ways don't necessarily follow logic and all throughout the city, but, I mean, is there a right-of-way that's established in there? 'Cause it kind of seems like we're putting a dumpster in the right-of-way.
I would need to check.
Huh?
I would need to check on that.
Right. We don't allow anything else in right-of-way, so I don't know why we would all of a sudden allow a dumpster to be in the right-of-way and any related trees or plantings that are required to be in the right-of-way, so. That would be other than that, I don't have a problem with it, I have a concern about that being in an area that we may need it to be a sidewalk or other right-of-way uses in the future.
Okay. Anything else? All right, thanks, John. All right, that'll take us down to public comment. The mayor is the presiding officer. All remarks shall be addressed to the city council as a body, not to individual members, and anyone wishing to speak shall come to the microphone. Give us your name and address to the city clerk. Limit remarks to 3 minutes unless further time is granted by council. Not speak a second time until everyone wishing to speak has spoken once, and no one can speak more than twice. And please do not speak unless you have the microphone and have been recognized. Anyone here this evening wishing to address council on any subject matter? Anybody?
I just want to know if Christian's coming to the mic to sing happy birthday to himself. No?
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Christian.
What a way to spend it, right? What a way to spend a birthday. All right.
Very unusual shade of
I make a motion to adjourn.
We do not have executive session this evening, correct? All right, we are out of here. Thank you so much.
He just turned the shade on red. It's almost a dead on match.
Mm-hmm.